My grandfather would tell me when I was a little girl, I think it was his way of teaching me history. He would ask me to read the newspaper uh, out loud to him, and and then ask me to stop after a particularly interesting news item, and he would give me the background so that I would in that way learn about the why the American government, because this would be under during the American regime under the Commonwealth, and he would say things like, well, let me tell you about how this came about. So we would start talking about how he was in the cabinet of Aguinaldo in the First Philippine Republic, and how he was in the retreat of the as the troops retreated before the American army from Malolos, where he was a member of the Congress, and then retreat back to Tarlac, where I think that's where he was captured, because then he would tell me in bits and pieces about how he had been imprisoned by the Americans and brought back to Manila in Intramuros and held in an American jail for being a member of the cabinet of the First Philippine Republic. My grandfather would also talk about how Aguinaldo had been deceived by the Americans into thinking that they were sincere in wanting to help the Philippines and the Philippine armed forces. He himself was in favor of the Germans. He, I think, was the only one among the advisors of Aguinaldo who was in favor of the Germans, because he would speak about how they were divided. Some Filipinos wanted to get aid from the Japanese. Others were in favor of the Americans. But he said he would always speak up for the Germans. And I asked him, why were you in favor of the Germans? And he said, well, it's because I'm a botanist, and as a scientist, I had more contacts with German scientists, and like Rizal, I admire the German culture, and as a scientist, I admired German precision. So I was convinced that our country would have been improved by contacts with the Germans, and I felt that they would be more sincere about wanting to help us. But he was outvoted in anyway. It was the fleet of Admiral Dewey who won the Battle of Manila Bay. So he said I didn't, but he continued contact scientific relations with the Germans. Most Filipinos take it for granted that we would have been sooner or later placed under the thumb of some colonial power, because we have probably been used to thinking of that in terms of an inevitable thing, being always colonized by the Spaniards and then coming under the influence of the Chinese. And it was quite a well-known fact that there were at least several gunboats in Manila Bay ready to pounce on the Filipinos if the Americans had not succeeded in winning the Battle of Manila Bay. There was a German fleet, there was a French battleship, there was an English ship also, and certainly the Japanese were on the lookout. My grandfather would often talk about the occupation of Manila by the Americans. It was something that would make him really angry. I often thought back to that, and he would describe how the Philippine troops had surrounded Manila. As a matter of fact, had conquered most of the Philippines. I mean, taken away most of the Philippines from the Spaniards, and had surrounded Manila, and then were stopped by the American troops from entering Manila until the Americans could do that themselves. Very often, when we went out on Sunday afternoons for a drive, he would show me exactly where the Filipino troops had been stopped. It would be somewhere on a run. Well, now it's called, I think, Pedro Hill, or somewhere just before the walls of Intramuros. And he said, we had reached this point, we had camped here, and we could very well have taken Intramuros ourselves, but the Americans would stop us. They said, no, we have agreed that you're going to stop in your trenches. And he would get very angry about that.